Living, and thus the heart will break, yet brokenly live on. A quote by Lord Byron, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. The world. The world is increasingly designed to depress us. Happiness isn't very good for the economy. If we were happy with what we had, why would we need more? How do you sell an anti-aging moisturizer? You make someone worry about aging. How do you get people to vote for a political party? You make them worry about immigration. How do you get them to buy insurance? By making them worry about everything. How do you get them to have plastic surgery? By highlighting their physical flaws. How do you get them to watch a TV show? By making them worry about missing out. How do you get them to buy a new smartphone? By making them feel like they are being left behind. To be calmed becomes a kind of revolutionary act. To be happy with your own non-upgraded existence. To be comfortable with our messy human selves would not be good for business. Yet, we have no other world to live in. And actually, when we really look closely, the world of stuff and advertising is not really life. Life is the other stuff. Life is what is left when you take all that crap away, or at least ignore it for a while. Life is the people who love you. No one will ever choose to stay alive for an iPhone. It's the people we reach via the iPhone that matter. And once we begin to recover, and to live again, we do so with new eyes. Things become clearer, and we are aware of things we weren't aware of before. Mushroom clouds. I never saw the double whamming of anxiety and depression coming before it knocked me out when I was 24. But I should have done. The warning signs were all there, the moments of despair as a teenager, the continual worrying about everything. In particular, I believe there were also a lot of warning signs while I was a student at Hull University. The trouble with warning signs, though, is that we only have the past to go on, not the future, and if something hasn't actually happened, it is hard to know that it will. The advantage of having had depression is that you know what to look for, and there was plenty to spot while I was at uni, but I never noticed it. I used to stare into space, while sitting on the 5th floor of the university library, imagining, with a kind of bleak terror, mushroom clouds on the horizon. I used to feel slightly strange sometimes, blurred around the edges as if I was a walking watercolor. And I did need to drink a lot of alcohol, now that I think about it. I also had what was a panic attack, though not on the scale of the later ones. Here was what happened. As part of my joint English history degree, I took a module on art history. Though I didn't realize it at the time, that meant that at some point in the term, I would have to do a presentation on a modern art movement. I chose Cubism. It sounds like nothing, but I was dreading it as much as you could dread anything. I had always been scared of performing and public speaking, but this was something else. I simply could not come to terms with the idea that I would have to stand in front of an entire seminar room full of, 12, maybe 13 people, and talk to them for 20 minutes. People who would be actively thinking about me and concentrating on me and listening to the words coming out of my mouth. Everyone gets nervous, my mom told me on the phone. It's nothing, and the closer you get to it, the closer it is to being over. But what did she know? I mean, what if I got a nosebleed? What if I couldn't speak at all? What if I pissed myself? There were other doubts, too. How do you say Picabia? Should I use a French accent for the name of George Braque's painting, Nature Morte? For about 5 weeks, I couldn't really enjoy anything because this was coming up, and I couldn't do a no-show because it was assessed as part of coursework. The thing that I was particularly worried about was the fact that I had to coordinate reading my words with the presenting of slides. What if I put the slides in upside down? What if I spoke about Juan Gris's portrait of Picasso while actually showing a Picasso? There were a seemingly infinite number of nightmare possibilities. Fittingly, given the subject of the talk was an art movement that involved abandoning perspective, I was losing perspective. The day came. Tuesday, March 17th, 1997. It looked like so many other drab whole days, but it wasn't. Looks were deceptive. There was a threat in the air. Everything, even the furniture in our student house, looked like the secret weapons in an invisible war against me. Reading Dracula from my Gothic literature module wasn't helping either. Quote, I am all in a sea of wonders. I doubt, I fear, I think strange things which I dare not confess to my own soul. End quote. You could always pretend to be ill, my new girlfriend and future wife Andrea said. No, I can't. It's assessed. It's assessed. Jesus, Matt, calm down. You've turned this into something it's not. And then I went to the chemist and bought a pack of Nature Calm and swallowed as many of the 24 tablets as I could. I think about 16, 2 sheets worth. They tasted of grass and chalk. I waited to feel the calm that was promised, but it didn't happen. Itching happened, and then a rash happened. The rash was all over my neck and hands, angry red blotches. My skin felt not only immensely itchy, but also hot. The seminar wasn't until 2:15. Maybe the rash was a stress response. Maybe I needed something else to calm me down. I went to the Union Bar and had a pint of lager and 2 vodka and limes. I had a cigarette. With 10 minutes to go before the presentation was due to begin, I was in the toilets in the history department. Staring at the swastika, some idiot had biroed onto the shining blonde wood of the door. My neck was getting worse. I stayed in the toilets, silently briefing myself in the mirror. I felt the power of time, the power of it as something unmoving. Stop, I whispered, but time doesn't stop, not even when you ask it nicely. Then I did it. I did the presentation. I stuttered and sounded frail as an autumn leaf in my head, and messed up the slides a couple of times, and failed to say anything at all that I didn't have written down in front of me in my best handwriting. People didn't giggle at my rush. They just looked deeply, deeply uncomfortable. But halfway through, I became detached from myself. I derealized. The string that holds onto that feeling of selfhood, the feeling of being me, was cut, and it floated away like a helium balloon. I suppose it was your standard out-of-body experience. I was there, not exactly above myself, but above and beside and everywhere all at once. Watching and hearing myself in a state of such heightened self-consciousness, I'd actually burst right out of myself altogether. Okay, so it wasn't much of one, but in my head it was. And if you are having a panic attack for a reason, a lion is chasing you, the lift door won't open, you don't know how to pronounce chiaroscuro, then it is not really a panic attack, but a logical response to a fearful situation. To panic without a reason, that's madness. To panic with a reason, that's sanity. I was still on the right side of the line. Just. But it is always hard for us to see the future inside the present, even when it is right there in front of us. The big A. Anxiety is the partner of depression. It accompanies half the cases of depression. Sometimes it triggers depression. Sometimes depression triggers anxiety. Sometimes they simply coexist like a nightmare marriage. Though, of course, it is perfectly possible to have anxiety minus depression and vice versa. Anxiety and depression are an interesting mix. In many ways, they are opposite experiences, and yet mix them together and you don't get a happy medium. Quite the opposite. Anxiety, which often bubbles up into panic, is a nightmare and fast forward. Anxiety, even more than depression, can be exacerbated by the way we live in the 21st century, by the things that surround us. Smartphones, advertising. I think of a great David Foster Wallace line. It did what all ads are supposed to do, create an anxiety relievable by purchase. Twitter followers, Facebook likes, Instagram, information overload, unanswered emails, dating apps, war, the rapid evolution of technology, urban planning, the changing climate, overcrowded public transport, articles on the post-antibiotic age, photoshopped cover models. Google-induced hypochondria. Infinite choice. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Soren Kierkegaard. The should we eat butter debate. Atomized living. All those American TV dramas we should have watched. All those prize-winning books we should have read. All those pop stars we haven't heard of. All that lacking we are made to feel. Instant gratification. Constant distraction. Work, work, work. 24-hour everything. Maybe to be truly in tune with the modern world means anxiety is inevitable. But here we must again distinguish between anxiety and anxiety. For instance, I was always an anxious person. As a child, I used to worry about death a lot. Certainly more than a child should. I also used to climb into my parents' bed as a 10-year-old and tell them I was too scared to go to sleep in case I woke up without the ability to see or hear. I used to worry about meeting new people. I'd get stomach aches on Sunday nights about Monday mornings. I even cried once, when I was 14, about the fact that music wasn't as good as it had been when I was little. I was a sensitive child, it's fair to say. But anxiety proper, generalized anxiety disorder, and the related panic disorder that I was diagnosed with too, can be, but isn't always a desperate thing. It can be a full-time occupation of gale force worry. That said, from my personal experience, anxiety, even more than depression, is very treatable. Slow down. If you suffer from anxiety on its own, or the fast-speed kind of depression that comes when it is fused with anxiety, there are things you can do. Some people take pills. For some, they are a literal lifesaver. But as we've seen, finding the right pill is a tricky science because, in truth, the science of the brain itself is not quite there. The tools used to analyze the processes of living human brains, things like CAT scans and later MRI scans, have been in existence only a few decades. Of course, these things are very good at providing pretty multicolored pictures of the brain and telling us which parts of the brain are most active. They can point to the things like the part of the brain responsible for the pleasurable feeling we get when we eat a chocolate bar, or for the distress when we hear a baby cry. Clever stuff, but there are weaknesses. Most parts of the brain do different things at different times, says Dr. David Adam, author of The Man Who Couldn't Stop. The amygdala, for example, plays a role in both sexual arousal and terror, but an MRI scan cannot differentiate between passion and panic. So what should we think when the amygdala lights up on the MRI scan when we are shown a picture of Cameron Diaz and Brad Pitt? That we are afraid of them? So the tools aren't perfect, and the neuroscience isn't perfect. Some things are known, but more isn't. Maybe this lack of true understanding explains why there is still stigma about mental health. Where there is mystery, there will be fear. Ultimately, there remains no surefire cure. There are pills, but only a liar would say they work every time, or that they are always an ideal solution. It is also rare that they cure someone without additional help, but when it comes to the anxiety side at least, there does seem to be one thing that works across the board, to a greater or lesser degree. Namely, slowing down. Anxiety runs your mind at fast forward rather than normal play speed, so addressing that issue of mental pace might not be easy, but it works. Anxiety takes away all the commas and full stops we need to make sense of ourselves. Here are some ways to add back that mental punctuation. Yoga. I was a yoga-phobe, but am now a convert. It's great because unlike other therapies, it treats the mind and the body as part of the same whole. Slow your breathing, not crazy deep breaths, just gentle. In for 5, out for 5. It's hard to stick to, but it is very hard for panic to happen if your breathing is relaxed. So many anxiety symptoms, dizziness, pins and needles, tingling, are directly related to shallow breathing. Meditate. You don't have to chant. Just sit down for 5 minutes and try and think of a single calming thing. a boat moored in the glittering sea, the face of someone you love, or just focus on your breathing. Accept. Don't fight things, feel them. Tension is about opposition, relaxation is about letting go. Live in the present. Here is meditation master Amit Ray. If you want to conquer the anxiety of life, live in the moment, live in the breath. Love. Anani's Nin called anxiety love's greatest killer. But fortunately, the reverse is also true. Love is anxiety's greatest killer. Love is an outward force. It is our road out of our own terrors, because anxiety is an illness that wraps us up in our own nightmares. This is not selfishness, even though people read it as such. If your leg is on fire, it is not selfish to concentrate on the pain or the fear of the flames. So it is with anxiety. People with mental illnesses aren't wrapped up in themselves because they are intrinsically any more selfish than other people. Of course not. They are just feeling things that can't be ignored, things that point the arrows inward. But having people who love you and who you love is such a help. This doesn't have to be romantic or even familial love. Forcing yourself to see the world through love's gaze can be healthy. Love is an attitude to life. It can save us. Peaks and troughs. As I have said, whenever I panicked, I wished for a real danger. If you are having a panic attack for a reason, then it is not really a panic attack, but a logical response to a fearful situation. Likewise, whenever I felt that downward gear shift toward that heavy and infinite sadness, I wished it had an external cause. But as time grew on, I knew something I hadn't known earlier. I knew that down wasn't the only direction. If you hung in there, if you stuck it out, then things got better. They get better, and then they get worse, and then they get better. Peaks and troughs, as a homeopath had told me while I was living at my parents' house. The homeopath's words had worked better than her tinctures. Parentheses. It's a weird thing, depression. Even now, writing this with a good distance of 14 years from my lowest point, I haven't fully escaped. You get over it, but at the same time, you never get over it. It comes back in flashes, when you are tired or anxious or happen eating the wrong stuff, and catches you off guard. I woke up with it a few days ago, in fact. I felt its dark wisps around my head, that ominous life is fear feeling. But then, after a morning with the best 5 and 6-year-olds in the world, it subsided. It is now an aside, something to put brackets around. Life lesson: the way out is never through yourself.